Okay. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Planning Committee meeting number 226. Welcome to everybody in the gallery tonight. Welcome to my fellow councillors. First, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting today, and for us here in Geelong, that is the Wadawurrung people, and like to pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and to acknowledge any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people that are with us here today. As I said, welcome to the Planning Committee meeting. I'd like to introduce you to our councillor panel. On my left, Councillor Jim Mason, Councillor Peter Murray. I'm Councillor Kylie Grisbeck. I've got Councillor Trent Sullivan, Councillor Stephanie Asher and Councillor Ron Nelson with me tonight. This is being live streamed on the internet, just so that you understand that and that you consent to your voice being heard. You will not be on the video when you're sitting at the desk there. I'd like to introduce you to our officers. On the my left-hand side, Joanne Van Slageren, who's the Manager of City Development. John Rush is Coordinator Stat Planning. Tim Webb, Team Leader Stat Planning, and Erin Jones is the Principal Planner Stat Planning as well. I've got two apologies listed here from Councillor Harwood and Councillor Mansfield. Councillors, have you got any conflicts of interest you'd like to declare at this point? No, thank you. I just need the confirmation of the minutes held from the 27th of October. Can I have a move and a seconder? Councillor Sullivan and Councillor Asher. Thank you. All those in favour? Moving the minutes? Yeah. Oh, you wasn't here. Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, Peter. All right, so just to give you the heads up, the procedure for tonight, we'll have the officer present the report in a brief summary to the committee. We may ask questions of that officer at that point. Then we will get the objectors or submitters to detail their concerns. We've got a 3-minute time limit on that particular submission. You will hear a ding and I'll ask you to wrap up after that ding. We may then ask you questions, the submitters questions, and then we'll go through all of those. We've got 8 speaking tonight, and then we have the applicant will then allowed to have from 5 to 10 minutes for their presentation as well, and we then will ask them questions if we've got them. Then we will further discuss the matter and make a decision. The decision of this committee is the final decision of council, acting under delegated authority. And then if anyone is aggrieved by the decision of this committee, they may then appeal to the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal in Melbourne, and our officers can help you with that process. All right, we might get started. Thank you very much. I'll hand over to you, Erin, if that's okay.
Thank you. Application being heard before the Planning Committee tonight is Planning Permit 1459 of 2018 for the use and development of the land for a restaurant, function centre and outdoor recreation facility being a children's farm at 65 to 105 Lings Road, Conowari. The subject site is located on the east side of Lings Road, approximately 500 metres south of Barwon Heads Road. It comprises 2 lots known as 65 to 101 Lings Road and has an overall area of approximately 22 hectares. The site contains an existing dwelling and associated outbuildings, including a machinery shed and shearing shed. The southern boundary of the site adjoins Mertnagirt Lagoon, which is an area of conservation value and is covered by the Public Conservation and Resource Zone and the Environmental Significance Overlay Schedule 2. On the western side of Lings Road is the 13th Beach Golf Links Resort, which contains dwellings and a golf course with associated club facilities. The other adjoining properties to the north and the east of the subject site are also zoned Comprehensive Development Zone Schedule 1. Whilst currently vacant, this land is identified for the future expansion of the 13th Beach Golf Links course. It is not identified for any residential accommodation or commercial uses. The subject site is zoned farming zone and is not subject to any overlays. The application was submitted on the 14th of December 2018, and it initially proposed the use and development of the land for a restaurant, function centre, outdoor recreation facility and a replacement dwelling. The replacement dwelling component has since been removed. The initial proposal was for the use of the restaurant to be operated with the hours of 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. 7 days a week, with patron numbers of 180. The restaurant was proposed to be contained within the existing shearing shed and a new building constructed to contain the kitchen facilities. The function centre was proposed to be operated with the hours of 11 a.m. to midnight, 7 days a week, with patron numbers of 110, and was to be contained within the existing machinery shed. In June 2019, after consultation with internal council departments and the relevant external referral agencies, the application was amended which included minor changes to the plans and further documentation relating to technical reports for drainage and ecological assessments. In July 2019, the application was placed on public notice and a total of 41 objections were received. The objections related to noise generation, increased traffic and impacts on Lings Road, dust generation from traffic on Lings Road, safety when entering and exiting Lings Road from Barwon Heads Road, and the impacts on the lagoon. In September and November 2019, the applicant engaged with both DELP and Parks Victoria in relation to concerns raised by the relevant referral authorities relating to the potential environmental impacts of the proposal. This resulted in amendments to the overall development and use, which were submitted to Council in June 2020. In November 2019, the applicant also consulted with Vic Roads regarding the upgrade of the intersection of Lings Road and Barwon Heads Road, which resulted in Vic Roads providing consent to the proposal, subject to any permit issued containing conditions requiring the applicant to construct an upgrade to this intersection. So in June 2020, the applicant revised the application following consultation with the relevant referral authorities and made the following changes. They reduced patron numbers for the restaurant to 80 patrons and reduced the hours of operation to 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. 7 days a week. Also proposed the deletion of the proposed new restaurant building. Proposed the increase of patron numbers to the function centre to 200, reduced the hours of operation to 6 p.m. to midnight Thursday to Sunday. Proposed the removal of the northern car park and the removal of the wider drainage swale and drainage basin. These plans were referred to the relevant referral authorities, including DELP, Parks Victoria and Vic Roads, and following referrals, the re-referrals, all of the referral authorities provided consent to approve the proposal subject to conditions. These plans are the basis of the assessment and the report before the committee today. In July 2020, public notification was undertaken again, resulting in additional objections. These objections were consistent with the previous objections submitted, noting the same concerns with the proposal. An approved cultural heritage management plan was submitted in April 2022. As this is an application requirement, a decision was unable to be reached on this application prior to the cultural heritage management plan being submitted. Following the submission of the CHMP, a third round of public notification was undertaken due to the length of time that had lapsed since the previous notification. After the 3 rounds of the notification period, a total of 150 objections were received. The application itself has been assessed against the provisions of the farming zone, the relevant planning policy framework contained within the officer's report, and clauses 5206 car parking and 5234 bicycle facilities. The application was considered to be consistent with the relevant policy and decision guidelines of the relevant zone. In particular, it's considered that the proposed use will not result in the loss of any significant agricultural land due to the size of the subject site and the inability of the site to be consolidated into adjoining land to provide for a larger farming allotment. The proposal is considered to have an appropriate agricultural component which is suitable to the scale of the site, being the children's farm. It is considered notable that the uses proposed will utilise existing buildings on the site and do not require extensive building works, and as such, the existing landscape will remain relatively unchanged. The proposal does not present a large-scale operation with intrusive buildings or development and will not be overly visible from key vantage points. It is therefore considered that the proposal will not result in any detrimental impacts on the landscape and environmental values of the green break between Barwon Heads and Armstrong Creek, as recognised in the Bellarine Peninsula Distinctive Area and Landscape Statement of Planning Policy. A more detailed assessment against the DELC is located at page 51 to 53 of the officer's report. Consideration was also given to the concerns raised within the objections when assessing the application. As a result, conditions are recommended to address amenity, environment and traffic concerns. Specifically, the conditions that are contained on page 7 of the report, conditions 3 and 5, have recommended operating hours significantly less than what has been applied for. And conditions 7 to 11 relate to noise mitigation and require acoustic treatments and reports to be submitted to satisfy noise concerns. Traffic concerns have also been addressed through conditions provided by Vic Roads and Council's Engineering Department in relation to the construction of the intersection of Barwon Heads Road and Lings Road and the construction of Lings Road. Conditions are also included from DELP to address environmental concerns. It should be noted that DELP and Parks Victoria are the land managers of the lagoon, and therefore their assessment of the environmental impacts and their consent to the proposal subject to conditions has been relied upon as part of this assessment and to form the recommendation of approval. I'd just like to draw attention to proposed condition 9, which is located at page 8 of the report. It's suggested that this condition be reworded should a decision to approve the permit be made. Condition 9 currently states that the outside areas are not to be used for patrons after 9 p.m. Wednesday to Sunday and 11 p.m. Thursday to Saturday. It is considered that this should be reworded to reflect the proposed operating hours contained at conditions 3 and 5, which for the function centre of Friday to Saturday rather than Wednesday to Sunday, given that this would be the only times patrons are permitted on site at these hours. So overall, based on the assessment contained within the officer report, it is respectfully recommended that the application be supported subject to the conditions and a notice of decision to grant a permit be issued in accordance with the recommended conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Erin. Councillors, questions of Erin at this point in time? Yes, Councillor Mason.
Thanks, Councillor Grisbeck. Thank you, Erin, for that comprehensive report. My question is in relation to light and noise, and I think I've read in the report that it's not expected that there will be serious effect on neighbouring properties. My question is in relation to the Ramsar Treaty, the Jambar Treaty and the Chamba Treaty. And has there been much consideration of light and noise on wildlife, specifically birds, butterflies and terrestrial animals?
At the beginning of the application, we did have a meeting with DELP and Parks Victoria along with the applicant, and those issues were discussed at that time. It was considered that the light wasn't significant enough that it would have a significant impact on the flora and fauna of the Menunagurt Lagoon, and so we've relied heavily on DELP's referral response in relation to that.
Thank you. I note that there was an ecological report as well, which was not as positive. Do you have any comment about that ecological report?
That ecological report was also reviewed by DELP, so we have, as I said previously, relied heavily on their recommendations and the conditions that they've proposed in relation to the impacts on the lagoon.
Thank you.
Murray?
I just want to clarify, in my mind anyway, the one of the conditions is whether Lings Road is sealed. Is that relying on the number of vehicles, or is the condition that would have to be sealed?
So the condition, I'm just bringing it up. The condition requires that prior to any use starting, that plans have to be submitted to council for the construction of that road. However, condition 31 says that once the maximum vehicles per day exceed 150, that's when the construction of Lings Road should be undertaken.
Yeah. So if the number of vehicles, say if it's approved and this is an up and going project, if there's 100 cars using Lings Road, it doesn't have to be sealed, but once there's maybe 160, 170 vehicles using the road, it has to be sealed. Yeah. Thank you.
I might follow up to that question as well. So we're saying here that they make the payment equivalent to 3.25% of the cost of those works. Where does that put council where does that put the responsibility of the rest of the road to be sealed?
That 3.25 is just a checking fee,
Right.
for engineering when they're looking at the construction and the detailed plans.
So the full cost of the road is with the applicant under this condition? Right, okay, thank you. Thank you for clearing that up. All right, councillors, no further questions at this point? Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask the objectors to come up, and I'm going to do them in the order that I have them on this form here. Well, I just say before we start is that we would like to possibly not have a repeat of points, and I think you guys are well organised enough to hopefully not repeat points, but that would save a lot of time there. So if we've heard it already once, maybe twice, but it would be great if we could do that. You will hear the ding, and I'll probably just ask you to wrap up after that point, if that's okay. So I have Chris Brown first on the list, please. Thank you. Welcome. Please take a seat.
I've just got some handout.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just pull that microphone a little bit closer. Perfect. Thank you very
How's
much.
that? Hi there. Last Sunday, you might remember, was a glorious day. It was about 25 degrees at 6 p.m, and we were blessed to enjoy a meal and a cold beer on the veranda of our property, listening to the sounds of the crashing waves due to the gentle southeasterly breeze, which is actually common as we head into the festive season of summer. As per the handout that I just gave you, the ocean is approximately 800 metres from our home. My name is Chris Brown. Today I'm here to speak on behalf of the 112 local residents who lodged objections against the Lings Road development, most of whom will be negatively impacted by the 200-person function centre, which will be permitted to have live music until 11 p.m, which is located 150 metres from my home. If this development is approved tonight, it will result in an enforcement nightmare for the Geelong Council, especially in relation to condition 20. Apologies to Steph, to Jim and to Trent for the repeat of my personal story, but for the benefit of councillors Grisbeck, Maloney and Nelson, I thought it was important to share the primary reason I'm here tonight. I'm here on behalf of my 13-year-old son, Sam. He's a great young man and has overcome many challenges. Sam was born with 4 neurological disabilities, one of which is at the centre of why we strongly oppose a late-night function centre in a farming zone. Sam has an acute sensory disorder which makes him extremely sensitive to senses such as light, smell, touch, but specifically noise. This inability to filter out unwanted sensors forced our family to leave the city and find a property in a quiet location which intentionally adjoins a farm and a native protected wetland. This has been life-changing for Sam and our family, as it gives him an opportunity to decompress when he comes home from school, and critically in making sure he has uninterrupted sleep so he recovers from his daily sensory overload. Unfortunately, his sensory challenges remain an issue. To put the severity of his condition into context, he is only able to attend school for 3.5 hours per day. So if a late night venue went ahead, his acute sensitivity to noise would force us to move. But Sam is not alone. Many adjoining residents, some of whom are here tonight, also have health issues that require the tranquility of a quiet setting to help manage their own challenges. That is why they moved to the Conowari community, and this is why so many Bellarine constituents have opposed this unexpected development in a farming zone on the shores of a Ramsar wetland. Councillors, please listen to the 112 constituents that will be negatively impacted by this insensitive development, because unfortunately the 200-person function venue with late night amplified music is not 800 metres away from our homes like the ocean, but a mere 150 metres. Thanks so much for listening and for your valuable time.
Perfectly. Councillors, please remain just to...
Sure.
Yeah. Councillors, any questions of Chris at this point? Chris, I might just ask, your home, is that in the fourth loop? Is that
It
where...
is. It's just circuit on the mat.
All right, okay.
Yep.
Right, thank you, Chris. The next person, Graham and Janet Jackson. Welcome, Graham.
Myself, we live at 42 Second Drive, and our house is 20 metres from Lings Road. We're very concerned with the issues which have just been mentioned, noise and dust. We're concerned that the number of vehicles will be allowed without a sealed road to go to 150. We don't know how you're going to work out when it's over 150. And we're very concerned that now we probably have about 10 vehicles a day go up and down that road, and we're going to see a 15 multiplied by 15 times the volume of traffic. It's going to be all day, and there is no doubt that we, in our property, we have a large amount of dust coming into the property. We see that there is an offer to grade and maintain the road. And the way that we look at that is that when there is a rest period, there's going to be graders on the road, there's going to be work on the road, and it's adding to the problems. If you're going to grade the road and level it out, you're going to make it smooth, level, cars can go faster. If you've got potholes, you've got corrugations in the road, they can't go as fast. So we've got somebody offering to do the road, we're going to have more disruption to our life. Grade it 3, 4, 5 times a year, it's just worse for us. Now, the way that I'm looking at it at the moment is that you've got to consider sealing that road for the sake of the people in that road, the dust that's coming out from cars going up and down that road. For us, we ask that at the worst, if it could be sealed from where the houses are to the property. We ask if that could be done, if that's an option. We see also that it is very, very important that the speed limit is reduced on that road to a level where it reduces dust. And I'm talking about reducing the speed limit where the homes are. At the moment, we've got cars going down that road up to 100 kilometres an hour. There's no control over it. Why isn't a speed limit considered near the homes? You'll reduce the dust. You'll do everything. Seal the road. The other option too that should be considered, why do the people going to this centre have to come down all the way down Lings Road where people live? Why can't the applicant put a driveway in on the northern boundary of his property, send it across the northern side of his property, down his eastern boundary and into his function centre, etc., etc. Now, that will take the traffic and everything away from us. It'd help. It'd help if you don't want to seal the road. Now, I sent a video round of an event that took place on the 24th of February this year. That event was attended by I don't know how many people, but there were a lot of cars, I don't know, over 100 people plus. We had live music, we had all the features that we're going to get when this function centre would be started. Now,
Graham, I'm just going to ask you to wrap it up, if that's all right.
You could hear the music from our property, you could hear people talking, and we're going to have the same issues again, and our life is disrupted. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Just wait there unless
Yes.
councillors have got any questions of Graham. Councillor Murray?
Not so much to Graham, but to the officers, and on a point that Graham raised about the road possibly being on the applicant's property. Was that ever discussed with the applicant?
No, that's never been raised with the applicant.
Okay. Now, Graham, the function in February was just at a private party or something there?
I believe so. I don't know what it was about, but it was during the daytime, and it had all the hallmarks of what could happen in the future. I would suggest there may have been, I'm guessing, up to 100 cars there. There were outdoor umbrellas, there were cool rooms, there was everything. Music, people talking. It was an absolute duplicate of what I'm feared is going to happen. And the music, if you listen to those videos, you can hear it. It's amazing. A man was singing, and then we had a woman sing. And I'm afraid to say the woman's voice was far louder on our property than the man's. How's all this going to be controlled when you allow music outdoors?
Like a 21st, or what was it? I'm just funeral. Awake.
Wait.
Okay.
Okay.
No, thanks.
Okay.
Thank you,
very
Graham.
much.
Thank you very much. The next person on my list, we have Peter Hocking. And Peter has, councillors, you have Peter's document here, which is her statement. We have read that statement, so just so that the group is aware, unless Peter's here directly. No? Okay. Thank you. Councillors, you've read that document. We're going to go to Felicity and Shane Davis. Thank you very much. Welcome. Oh, Tony, hi.
How
I've got
are
my
you?
glasses on. How are you?
Good, thank you. Okay, thank you. So my clients live at 44 2nd Avenue. Their house is between 11 and 15 metres from the edge of the road of Lings Road, so the edge of the actual gravel surface. So the three main issues I want to raise tonight are policy, dust, traffic, noise, amenity impacts. So there's one main policy, 1704-1L07, it's in the report. That's the primary policy for these sort of uses in rural areas. And what it says is you should support uses associated with an agricultural activity on the land. And what the delegate report makes really clear is there's no agriculture on this property. So the report talks to a children's farm. Now, children's farm is essentially a petting zoo. It's not agriculture, it's not productive. So there's no productive agriculture going on here. So you miss the first test of that policy. If you're aware of the application at Tower Road, Port Arlington, it went to VCAT recently. It had a vineyard associated with all the other activities. VCAT refused it, and one of those grounds of refusal was that the agricultural proposal was out of balance with the tourism. Now, it had a vineyard of, I think, about 1.5 hectares. So 1.5 hectares of a vineyard versus a petting zoo, and it was refused because it was out of balance. What the policy then says is you discourage tourism not associated with agriculture unless you meet certain tests. And one of those is the circumstances of the use are unique and support site selection in a rural location over an urban location. So you'd think something like Adventure Park. In another application in Bellpost Hill, it's Harrison v Greater Geelong, Evans Road, it was a similar function centre. It was refused by the tribunal because, as they said, it's a function centre, it's not a unique use. So it doesn't meet all these other tests, but it certainly doesn't need that location. Then move into the amenity strategies and the traffic and services strategies, and it talks to minimising detrimental amenity impacts to neighbouring properties with noise, hours of operation, patron numbers, vehicle movements and so on. Services strategy then talks to having access to a constructed or a sealed road, and it's been raised earlier. This isn't a sealed road. Noise and dust from a road 10 to 15 metres from my client's windows between the hours of 8 a.m. and 11 p.m. is substantial. Now, whether that road is sealed or not, that is a significant increase in noise. The development, the Harrison v Greater Geelong application, had unsealed access 66 metres from a neighbouring property. 150 patrons 15 times a year. Tribunal refused it because of the impact of noise from vehicles coming and going. So if my clients can hear waves breaking 1.3 kilometres from their or south of their house, what's the chance they're going to hear noise from this venue, which is a function centre with a band in a converted shed about 400 metres away? And we'd say it's substantial. If you refer back to the acoustic report, it was prepared in 2018, and it actually notes that the Friday to Sunday that they did the testing wasn't appropriate for acoustic testing. And it sat for 4 years. In 4 years, that hasn't been reassessed. So we've got grave concerns generally about acoustics, primarily about the use of Lings Road. In summary, we're saying that this site's not strategically justified. The amenity impacts are substantial. They will occur and there will be ongoing enforcement, there's no doubt. I've got numerous concerns about the drafting of the conditions. I think there's holes throughout that. There's conditions here that condition 9 was already talked about. I've got issues with condition 7, 8, 9, 10, 16, 20, 30, 31. They're so badly worded, I don't know how you could actually, if you were of a mind to approve this, how you could approve it with these conditions here tonight, because it just doesn't work. Just, if I can go to maybe one of my primary ones, being Lings Road. And the maximum vehicles per day exceeds 150, or buses begin using Lings Road. Now, the maximum vehicle numbers exceeds 150, or the maximum vehicle movements exceeds 150. It's really unclear. So, you know, if it's 150 vehicles, I could drive up and down it 6 times and call myself one vehicle. There's things like that, and it's right throughout this that just don't make sense. The hours don't meet condition 8. Talks to...
I might just get you to wrap up if that's okay.
Yep. Talks to music between the hours of 11 a.m. and 8 p.m. Monday to Sunday, so 7 days a week. And the use isn't open those times, 7 days a week. Deliveries can happen up till 10 p.m. The use isn't open those days. So I think, as I said, there's a whole bunch of conditions in here which we are really concerned about.
Thank you very much, Tony. Councillors, questions for Tony? Councillor Murray?
Tony, actually, you raised, I don't know how many points there, maybe a dozen, perhaps more, but the first probably half a dozen, and you referred to prior cases that have been before VCAT and decided on perhaps similar circumstances to what we're to make a decision on tonight. Now, are the officers aware of the matters that you've raised? Do you?
Well, I mean, Tower Road was only decided, I think, 2 months ago. Tim was certainly involved in that one.
No, okay. and it's a question without notice to the officers, the matters that have been raised by Tony, is there any explanation or any answer? I mean, because we don't know the circumstances of, well, some might, but everything that Tony has raised in her before us.
Might just start. Obviously, have you taken into account the decision made at VCAT is probably the question.
Well, I think there was about 4 or 5 cases that you quoted.
There's Harrison v Greater Geelong, which was 2019, under using the same policy, and then there was the Tower Road, which was 8 weeks ago.
Yeah, there's various cases and function centres that have been previously reviewed. Of course, each application and site has a different context in the proposal. The very recent one at Tower Road, the Tower Road Resort, was a very large scale. It was proposed with a vineyard, but also it was a very significant proposal size development, several hundred vehicle movements in the order of. So it was a much, much larger scale than this one. There are other ones that others can talk to.
I can talk about Evans
Do you want to
Road.
just
I was at
use
the
the
hearing
mic?
for Evans Road.
Yep.
So the council here refused Evans Road. Evans Road sits on top of a hill, and it was recommended to be refused and was refused at VCAT. Sorry, councillor.
No, get on the microphone, John.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Evans Road. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. Can everyone hear me? Thank you. Evans Road was refused by this council, and Evans Road was to be in a building that was like a shearing shed, so it was very open. It sits on top of a hill as well, and we also had a situation where Vic Roads didn't support Evans Road as well. Very different site context if you go to Evans Road, which is of course quite some distance away from here. Not saying that there aren't similarities, because they're both function centres and we acknowledge that. There are function centres throughout the Bellarine that we all go to, that we all enjoy. There was an amendment some time ago that was well known called Amendment VC 110 that allowed function centres not more than 10 functions per year, and that used to be the lie of the land for everyone. The state government changed that and opened up that parameter to all farming zone sites to apply for more. So some have been supported and some have been refused. We're here talking about 2 of them. As Tony has said, there's some that have been supported. We could add some support for those. But for Evans Road, very different site context, I would say.
Thank you. I think Councillor's question. Councillor Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Now, my question's to Tony, and with the greatest respect to everyone here, because I'm assuming most of you live in the golf course. My question's around, you talked about, the first thing you talked about was, and the previous person talked about the road, and I have no issues with that, and I get that, I totally get that. There's lots of dusty roads out there. But the agricultural permits, you're saying this is not for agriculture, so it shouldn't be allowed. Wasn't the golf course, that's not agriculture, yet that was allowed. So why are you saying one should be allowed and one shouldn't be allowed?
It was approved many years ago under completely different controls and under a different zone. Completely different.
Well, a farm zone. It was a farm zone.
No, it was a special use zone. It was a specifically applied special use zone at the time called Tamara Resort. So this is back in about 2000, oh God knows, a while ago.
Hang on. If we're going to talk, we just need to on the mic.
It was some time ago. It was, I worked at the council back in 97, and I reckon it was starting around then, maybe 98. And it was called Tamara Resort. And it was specifically, I think at the time it was even in a comprehensive development zone. When the planning schemes changed in 2000, it went into, I think, a special use zone. So it's been through various changes, and it was specifically set up as a resort. This is being assessed under a policy that says that it has to be associated with agriculture, or it has to be such a specific use that it deserves a completely different setting.
And the music at the clubhouse, what are the rules around that? There's no music there?
All right.
I couldn't even answer that.
All right. We won't hold Tony. Thank you. Any other questions for Tony whilst Tony's with us? No? Councillors, thank you, Tony, for representing Felicity and Shane. Next, I'd like to call Andrew O'Brien. Thank you. Welcome.
Chair, I'm Andrew O'Brien. I've been a traffic and road safety engineering consultant for over 50 years, or with government and then consulting. And I make the submission on behalf of the group of 112 residents. Bowen Heads Road, Lings Road intersection is the most inherently unsafe main road intersection on the Bellarine. With the new 80 km/h speed limit, the required sight distance along Bowen Heads Road to an approaching vehicle is about 200 metres. For a right turn out of Lings Road, there is only 4 seconds of sight distance, about 90 metres available for vehicles coming through on your left. Vehicles coming on the right, if you're making either a right or left turn, is all of 130 metres, gives you 6 seconds of sight distance to make you a call as to whether or not you're going out. If you're in a truck or a bus, it'll take you 10 seconds to do that turn. In the first traffic report, it's clearly stated under the relevant Austroads guide, the traffic predicted to be generated above clearly triggers a warrant for a full-length channellised right turn and an auxiliary left turn along the Bowen Heads Road into Lings Road. Why was this deleted from the second report when those warrants are still in existence and are clearly met? The traffic plan in the second application was clearly deficient, as there was no bicycle lane for eastbound cycling and there was no guardrails, and it was unsafe. The word safety does not appear in either traffic's report. Just before noon today, on a hint given to me by one of the other residents, I contacted Vic Roads again, or DOT, and fortunately got a good reply quickly. I was advised at 1:46 today that DOT had considered 2 more plans from Traffics. And I was provided a copy, printed copy was handed to me on the doorsteps here. Plan now agreed by DOT contains the original right turn treatment, which is what we have pushed for very hard, but no left turn auxiliary lane. That left turn auxiliary lane could be added in with no extra work other than about 200 square metres of pavement and a bit of extra curbing, and would be a shared left turn and cycle lane, which has become quite common now as a road safety measure to accommodate both left turners and cyclists. I had provided a functional layout plan to both Vic Roads and Council over a year ago, demonstrating how you could do the original treatment without having to take acquisition from the land in the southeast corner. I'm further advised by several persons who, with appropriate knowledge, of, including assessing referrals for Vic Roads, the Council can place a condition that is safer or an upgrade rather than just relying on the conditions provided by Vic Roads. Also, a road safety audit must be required by Council as a condition of any NOD. I've done 4 road safety audits for Vic Roads at the proposed roundabout by the airport. The second traffic report states Lings Road is predicted to generate on average of the order of 200 vehicles per day, including existing traffic. Well, how do that fit when you have a function centre generating 130 odd trips and the 2-hour peak hour for the restaurant of 128 trips? So my estimate would be that the function and the restaurant together will generate around 350 trips per day, which is well in excess of any requirement to seal the road.
You're on your last...
If I have just one...
No problem.
Point, if I may. The road was regraded a couple of weeks ago and there's more than 100 potholes in it now. It has been raining, yeah, but it often rains. If an NOD is to issue, there must be 2 conditions to reduce but not alleviate the traffic-related impacts on residents. All parking on Lings Road be banned, so you can't have overflow parking there. And all access to the site is beside the northern boundary, as one presented before said, goes at least 100 metres to the east, is sealed, and that there is no parking within 100 metres of Lings Road, and that all drivable areas are sealed to reduce noise and dust problems. I urge you not to issue a notice of decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you. Councillors. Councillor Jim Mason.
Thank you. I understand you are involved in traffic engineering. Would you be able to give a off-the-cuff estimate of the cost? What you
No,
of
the costs have gone
resealing
so
the road?
skyrocketed so much since I was involved in doing any of that. But it's talking $100, $150 a square metre of pavement. But it seems the traffic control works cost as much as the pavements do.
Question to the officers is, it's not known when we might reach a movement or count of 150 vehicles per day. If it occurs in a couple of years' time, it's decided. How can we be sure that the road could be reliably funded by a business which may or may not be successful?
I guess that will be up to the applicant. Obviously, if the business isn't successful, then the need to construct the road would no longer be there. It is a requirement of the planning permit. If they weren't able to construct the road, then it would be a matter of enforcement in terms of them not being able to continue the uses that have been approved should a permit be issued.
Thank you. Councillor Murray.
Andrew, are you aware of the Vic Road conditions that have been imposed?
Yes, yeah.
Yep. So there's
Appear to be what's on the new plan.
just wait till construction of a right turn lane on Bowen Heads Road is part of construction of a rural basic left turn treatment on Bowen Heads Road.
Which is nothing.
Installation of street lighting.
Yep.
And vegetation removal to achieve satisfactory intersection sight lines.
Yes.
Yes. So what are you made a comment about those conditions?
Sorry, about the...
You make a comment on those conditions?
Yeah, because going back to the original plan, which was quite reasonable, except it required acquisition. And my understanding, they went back and say, well, we can't do that. So I produced that plan which showed you could do it, and that's been reiterated in what is now approved, with the exception of the left turn lane, which has not been included, even though it meets the warrants that Vic Roads are supposed to operate by. And I did say in my notes, which I didn't read out, that that condition of construction of the road should happen as a condition of permit before development occurs.
So you don't agree with the Vic Roads assessment?
Well, they didn't assess the requirement for the left turn. They did for the right turn, because under the guidelines, which are quite strict, as I read out at the start, they required a auxiliary left turn lane, and they still do under the guidelines. And there is certainly room to adjust the plan which they've now approved to include that as a short left turn auxiliary lane shared with a cycle lane.
All right. And right at the start, you mentioned something was approved today, or from the Department of Transport today, and you handed it out earlier.
They've approached Vic Roads several times, and this is the first time they've said that they had further plans than the ones which were submitted with the application. I don't know if the officers have ever seen these plans, but I gathered from Grant Edmund that he hadn't.
Can I just clarify that you're saying that Vic Roads had plans for that intersection that were different to the plans that are in this particular application?
They are now quite different to the one that was in the second application.
Okay. Right. Officers, do we know about those other plans?
Yes, they were the plans that were referred to Vic Roads, which resulted in them withdrawing their objection and consenting to the proposal based on those plans, and that's what the conditions that have been included in the permit have been based on those plans as well.
That's clear. Councillor? Yep. And Councillor Nelson?
My question's with regard to the left turn lane. Do you mean left turn lane in or left turn lane out?
A left turn lane going in, so if you're coming from Bowen Heads Road, you can pull off and not get rear-ended.
Yeah, same as at the golf course.
Yeah. Only it would not need to be as long as the golf course one.
Thank you. All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your submission. John Nolan. Welcome, John.
And thank you very much, councillors. So I'm not from the Fourth Loop. I represent the Barwon Heads Association. I'm a resident of Barwon Heads. My focus is going to be on the Ramsar wetland, Murtnagirt Lagoon. I'm a practicing hydrogeologist. Also, I'm one of 3 EPA accredited auditors for natural resources and industrial facilities in Victoria. Barwon Heads Association has provided 2 written submissions. The first was after the original application was made, and the second was after the application was amended and lodged. We recommend that the application be refused by council on the following grounds. First, it's likely to adversely impact the environmental values of Murtnagirt Lagoon. Second, the application hasn't been referred to the Federal Department of Energy and Environment. It's the appropriate referral authority for the Ramsar wetland matters. Thirdly, the noise generated may adversely impact upon the local amenity, including the Murtnagirt Lagoon fauna, particularly the migrating shorebirds, which hasn't been considered. And finally, I support the previous advice in relationship to the conditions. I congratulate Council on the effort put in terms of developing up those proposed conditions, but we're of the view that they certainly will not mitigate the potential adverse environmental impacts. And we also note that many of them refer to and require implementation of EPA guidelines that are now superseded and not applicable. I'll just go into some aspects of the environmental issues associated with Murtnagirt Lagoon. Firstly, the work by Ecolink Consulting on the biodiversity assessment made a recommendation that the application not be referred to Department of Environment, and that was on the basis of the Water Technology Report of 2019, and that report was superseded. So we don't believe that that advice is valid. It's not referring to the correct Water Technology Report, which is different from the 2019 report. We also note that the Kerangmite CMA recommended that the application be referred to the appropriate authority, which is the Federal Department of Environment and Energy. This did not occur from our perspective. Is that my 3 minutes? Good grief, I've only started. Okay, sorry. The Barwon Heads Association made a submission with some detailed comments in relationship to the Water Technology Surface Water Management Report. We don't believe this was referred to DELP or Water Technology in terms of forming the final view. And certainly it doesn't seem to be considered by DELP in its assessment of the Water Technology report. We note that DELP doesn't appear to have independently assessed the environmental impacts in relationship to Murtnagirt Lagoon. It seems to rely on Water Technology, and our opinion in relationship to some of the aspects of water technology, in particular in relationship to groundwater and the fact that they believe it's going to be diffuse discharge is incorrect from our perspective.
You to make your final statement.
Yep. The final thing is all of the noise recommendations in the conditions relate to the Environmental Protection Authority regulations and the Act pre the 2017. All of those guidance documents and SEPs have been discontinued and they're not relevant, not appropriate, can't be used. So that work needs to be done. So in conclusion, just reaffirm that we believe that this application should be not supported by Council.
Thank you, John. Councillors, I might just ask a question of the officers in relation to John's comment about the EPA guidelines. What would you say in reaction to those statements?
This application was referred to Council's Environmental Health Department. Those conditions came directly from them. We actually went back to them prior to the finalisation of my report, and they amended the condition to what's included there. So we've relied on their recommendations for those conditions.
Okay, thank you, Erin. Councillors, any other questions of John? Councillor Mason?
Look, I'm sorry, I didn't hear properly or I didn't understand, but I thought I'd read somewhere that the Council's Environment Department actually did not support.
So there's the Environment Department, which deals with the flora and fauna side of things, and then the Environmental Health Department, which is actually for noise and amenity protection. So they're two separate departments. So the Environmental Health Department did support the application subject to these conditions.
So to clarify then, there is an element within the City of Greater Geelong involved with the environment that did not support the proposal?
Our Environment Department did recommend refusal of the application. However, given that DELP were supportive, who also are looking at the environment, and they provided those conditions, it was considered that the concerns raised by Council's Environment Department could be mitigated through those conditions. And our Environment Department also did provide conditions which have been included on the permit to address their initial concerns.
Thank you. All right, thank you very much, John. Andrew Eaton. Welcome.
Thank you. So my name is Andrew Eaton. I'm speaking on behalf of Karen Eaton and myself, who are fortunate enough to live overlooking Murtnaggart Lagoon. I'm also speaking on behalf of the 112 residents who have lodged objections against this proposed development. I also acknowledge the expertise of fellow speakers on the lagoon. Just like to say that we're not anti-development, however, we as a community members and you as councillors are not doing our jobs if we do not protect the important wetlands. Everyone is aware that Murtnaggart Lagoon is a Ramsar protected site of international significance. The lagoon is one of the best remaining and the largest examples of coastal dry salt marsh. Dry salt marsh is crucial for survival of 14 threatened bird species, as well as international migratory shorebirds. Salt marsh is rapidly diminishing throughout the Bellarine region due to the increased stormwater runoff as a result of poor planning. A current and relevant example of this is the Carafe wetlands. It is determined that the Carafe wetlands has significantly been degraded through the stormwater. There are a number of areas where 95% of the vegetation has died, and the Surf Coast Shire Council's ecological consultants has stated that some of these dead areas may never recover. A report commissioned by the Save Barwon Heads Alliance outlined that the ecological character of Murtnaggart is under threat. This is demonstrated by the prevalence of freshwater reeds. The report states that any further disturbance, such as stormwater runoff, presents a significant risk. We must not repeat the mistakes of the Carafe wetlands. Any further impact on the lagoon will result in a putrid-smelling wasteland of non-Indigenous weeds and algae. We note that the Council's own environmental team do not support this application due to the fragile nature of the saline environment, stating that impacts from the land use may adversely affect or change the wetland composition and structure. We also note that an assessment under the Environmental Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act has not been completed. The Department of Climate Change, Energy and Environment and Water are very clear that because this is a Ramsar site, an EPBC assessment needs to be completed. We have the benefit of the experience from a number of experts who have worked on the Carafe Wetlands report. Second Nature Consulting has advised that the proposed vegetated swales are not effective, designed only for flow events and not adequately caring for larger rainfall. The solution does not account for when the soil is totally saturated from previous rainfall, and any further runoff will discharge into the lagoon. The developer's own water technology report acknowledges that retarding freshwater runoff is a challenge and that the intent is to minimise the effect on the lagoon. This implies that impacts are inevitable and that some of the level of impact is acceptable. Ramsar clearly states that there cannot be any significant impact on a Ramsar-listed wetland. We do not get a second chance with the lagoon and urge that the Council looks at the learnings from Sparrowvale and Carafe wetlands and vote no to this development.
Thank you, Andrew. Councillors have any questions for Andrew? Thank you. Oh, Councillor
For
Nelson.
the officers, just in regard, because this word Ramsar keeps coming up, and my question is about one of the objections to the. Sorry, I'll go back to my map. To the salt marsh to the south, that's the Ramsar wetland. Is that right? But is that the same site that's used for duck hunting?
Yes.
Why does the state government say this must be a Ramsar site, and yet say we're going to allow people to go in there and shoot birds?
That's probably a
Can't
question.
answer that.
We might take that question up.
This is one of the objections. So I'm just going on one of the objections.
Sure. Hang on. Yep.
So there was an objection from the people who undertake duck hunting, and their concern was more about whether it would having a function centre close to the lagoon would then impact on them being able to continue to hunt.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you for your submission. Andy McCauley. Thank you, Andy. Welcome.
There's been a number of things covered already. My name's Andrew McCauley. I've been heavily involved with the Save the Carafe campaign. I was invited by the Lings Road Action Group to speak tonight. I, like many people, moved down here because of the amazing environmental assets of the Bellarine and the areas around it. And then I found I was moving into an area of massive development, which is fine. But obviously and this is another example of the conflict between development and environment. And you guys are the gatekeepers. The councils are the ones that need to work out where the balance occurs. What happened with the Carafe? Well, we walked into the Carafe, and yes, we had so many reports over 15 years. The last one was from Water Technology, and I've got to say that it was interesting. I commissioned it, and at the end of the day, it's what drove the change back in the Surf Coast Shire Council. But as was explained to me by Water Technology, I mean, 70% of our work comes from councils. So what they said to me and what they wrote were very different. I've read the reports about the lagoon, or in some cases, I think it's called a swamp. It was in one of the reports, which was interesting. There is no doubt, and there is agreement, that there is currently damage being done. This is before any of this happens. It's already existing. It's got a golf course on both sides. This is a Ramsar site. And I was amazed that, and I'm sure that none of this housing that's going to now have these large conference centres in it would have been allowed now so near to a Ramsar site. But because it's there, it's now being converted into a very substantial, and it will have an impact. And that impact might just start in the Murdergurk lagoon and then go through to Lake Coonawarra, because stormwater is an issue that is becoming increasingly contested across the whole of Victoria and indeed Australia. I mean, it's a serious issue. This will produce stormwater. Now, if it becomes a bitumen road, then there's more stormwater. And it's a bitumen road all the way from the road to this outlet. Then it's going to have parking. I mean, and then it's going to have dust, and that means it's going to have sediment, and sediment's going to flow downhill. Where's it going to go? I mean, you talk about these vegetated swales. Wonderful. But you talk to Professor Fletcher or some of the experts about this and they'll say, it will not happen. But most importantly, how can you have an environmental committee that objects to this? They're not even represented here tonight. This is an environmental issue you're talking about. This is a carafe wetland personified. We've already had Sparrowvale and we've already had the carafe. Both of them will cost various councils tens of millions of dollars to resolve the problem. This could be the beginning of a similar issue. And I've spoken to the people at Parks Victoria, the people that gave the approval. I'd be interested to see whether they'd give it again. Their view was that there was no stormwater entering that lagoon. And I said, well, that's not possible. And they agreed. Unfortunately, I couldn't speak to the people, and the guy I wanted, unfortunately, was sick. But I know how that goes in those departments. They're big departments. These are marginal issues. And unless there's a real spotlight on it, it's just more paperwork. Now you've got an internal committee that has said, don't do it. And I can tell you that if you've got that and you haven't gone to and done an e-piece, done the proper research, which I would have thought was, the feds will be back down here. They've been down here before and they'll be down here again. And Tanya Plibersek is red hot on wetlands and salt marshes. These are significant areas in Australia. And you're at the interface to deal with it.
Thank you, Andy.
I suggest you knock back this proposal and give it a really good thought.
Thank you very much. Councillors, questions for Andy, please.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Murray.
Just in relation to the stormwater, there's no proposal for any new buildings in relation to this project. So, do you expect stormwater to increase?
Let him ask the question, please.
Will stormwater increase?
Absolutely. I mean, look, I don't know I don't know the complete roof areas, but you've got large parking areas. If you're going to park 200 cars, you're going to have if you're going to have a road, you're going to have, again, now it might become groundwater. It'll become groundwater with silt, which is even worse for areas such as this. You've got a cafe and a restaurant being put in there. You've already got a house there. Where the stormwater goes currently, I'm not completely clear. Okay. But I'd be staggered if there isn't a substantial increase. And that's what the reports that you received from, what were the reports I read? Ecology Australia, Water Technology, and the Ecolink report all said there would be increased stormwater. But they also said that there was an existing problem with the stormwater, even before anything happens here.
Thank you. All right. Any other? Yeah, Councillor Nelson.
My question is regard to the golf course again, and I'm not picking on people because I play golf there and think it's fantastic and love it, but where is the stormwater from there going?
Groundwater, and it's going into the, it will go into the, it's what they, I mean, again, the reports confirm it. That would have previously been bushland. I mean, we're going to pre-development. So this is how they define it. So when you get assessed, it's pre-development flows against post-development flows. Now, you're in a post-development phase, so where there was previously bushland is fairways on both sides. So you've got Bowen Heads and 13th Beach. My understanding is that both those courses are managed as effectively as they can as golf courses. But all that water, there would be groundwater flowing into the, and these reports confirm it. And it would be groundwater flowing in with nutrients because golf courses get sprayed. I mean, there's weed, there's all sorts of things that get sprayed. And I know that I've spoken to the people down there, we've got the same issue at the Sands. And they do as much as they can. But the Ramsar wetlands are unique environments, and they're very sensitive to a lot of this stuff, but particularly to stormwater. They're salt marshes. Fresh water is not its friend.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Thank you very much, Andy. Thank you. We are going to, that's the last that we're hearing. I have someone with their hand up, but unless you're on my list saying that you're presenting tonight, I can't allow any more. So, Joanne, would you mind just checking why we've got hand up? We've had a process. No, we've had a process by which we've asked people to put their hand up. Sorry, but I'm going to go to the applicant now. So, Simon, would you like to join us, please? Thank you. Thank you, Simon.
Councillor, thanks for the opportunity to speak here tonight, and apologies that our client isn't also here to attend. They're away on business overseas. At the outset of this project, our client committed to getting exemplar consultants involved in the project to ensure that we really conceived and designed a project that met best practice standards across the board. This has also involved significant consultation with the referral agencies as well as council, which has resulted in a slightly longer planning process. You'll note the application number from 2018. And we thank council officers and the objectors for that matter for bearing with us through that lengthy period. We can appreciate it would have created some uncertainty.
I might just bring the mic a bit closer, Simon. Thank you.
Apologies.
That's
Hopefully
okay.
that's a little bit better.
Thank you.
I did intend on taking you through a detailed sort of timeline of the application, but I believe Erin has adequately done that, so I won't bore you with going through the finite details again. But I'll start by outlining why we think we should support this application, deal with some of the draft conditions, and then I think there's probably a number of matters that have been raised by submitters tonight that we can provide some clarity on, and I hope that there's some questions from councillors that we can answer as well. So this proposal provides for an exciting tourism opportunity within the Bowen Heads area, broader Bellarine Peninsula region. The proposal's been designed to be site responsive and utilises the land efficiently in conjunction with the existing agricultural activities. This is a unique context for this site, and we do have some documents which, Sophie, can I ask you to just hand those around if that's okay? Yes, those ones there, thank you. In this pack you'll see just an aerial map with the zones overlaid, and I think Erin's sort of taking you to this. It's quite a unique site where it's wrapped around by the 13th Beach Golf Links Resort, and then it certainly has the Ramsar listed Murtnagirt Lagoon to the south, which we acknowledge is an incredibly sensitive environment and one that we've sought to respond to in great detail. We understand that there's expanded tourism and golf facilities planned for the vacant 13th Beach area to the north and the east of our site. And we say that this proposal has sought to do a couple of different things. One is which support the preservation of the rural landscape, and I think Erin's taken this to you as well. We're dealing with two pre-existing buildings, one being a machinery shed and one being a shearing shed, and both of these buildings are being refurbished to house both of the proposed restaurant and function centre. So there are no new buildings proposed on site. There was a new dwelling proposed as part of the original application which was removed and sought a separate planning permit, and that's since been dealt with. Of course, as some of the submitters rightly identified, there will certainly be a car park and roads which will generate some, what we would say is minimal additional runoff rather than substantial. And the application that we put forward identifies the use of swales and other measures to capture those and look to disperse that across the site, and as correctly suggested, go into the groundwater system. What we would say is that the impacts that can result from the injection of fresh runoff water into a sensitive location like Murtnagat Lagoon is, because it's saline, you get freshwater impacts, and that is the impact that you have on the saline plants that thrive in those locations. So that's something that we've sought to avoid through A, not having any additional buildings, and dealing with any runoff through the swales across the site. The proposal is going to offer the visitors the opportunity to experience a unique setting in a manner that's seldom replicated across the Bellarine Peninsula. The focus of this tourism offering maintains an agricultural focus, but is underpinned by the very attraction of the facility, and this having been modelled on the very successful farm project in Byron Bay, which is incredibly popular within that region. The intent is that the children's farm will be a central focus of this application, with the restaurant sitting close.
Sorry, just pause for a second. I might just ask the people in the gallery just to give the applicant their time. We all heard yours, so thank you. Simon, over to you.
Thank you, Councillor.
If there's going to be one more objection, I might actually ask you to leave. So thank you, Simon.
Councillor. The proposals also demonstrate the ability to manage noise and traffic issues, and rightly those two matters have been raised throughout these submissions, and we acknowledge that they are important matters to deal with. I think that hopefully councillors have had the opportunity to read the officer's report and perhaps see some of the material that was produced. Very detailed noise assessments. There was considerable engagement with our traffic engineers and Vic Roads over a ridiculously long period of time to come up with suitable designs that ensure that that intersection of Barwon Heads Road and Lings Road is going to be safe for people to use. I think there was a suggestion earlier that the word safety wasn't used in the traffic report, which we've double checked, and it certainly is. And finally, I'd just say that with this application, it's sought to achieve the balance between maintaining a rural land use, respecting the rural character, delivering a tourism facility that really gets to celebrate this region, but also manage the amenity impacts to both surrounding land uses as well as the sensitive environmental areas. One of the things I did want to take you to with the conditions that were put by the officer was the proposed reduction of days of operation. So we submitted for Thursday through to Sunday. The proposal is for Friday and Saturday only. We would suggest that there's perhaps a different method to achieving what the officers are seeking to do here, and we understand the efforts that they've made to curtail what perceived impacts there might be from adjoining landowners. We would say that perhaps a cap on the number of events throughout the year is a better model than limiting it to a Friday and a Saturday only. And what that affords our client is the flexibility of attracting different events. So a Thursday to Sunday operation might allow you to have things like corporate events, birthdays, engagements and weddings, whereas a Friday and Saturday function is probably more focused on the wedding and engagement party market. So it definitely provides our client with greater flexibility to deal with that. Now I might just move on to some of the particular matters that have come up through submissions, and hopefully this may address some of the conditions that councillors may have as well. As I mentioned, there was significant design work undertaken with Vic Roads to achieve a design that was acceptable. I think there's been some suggestions about car parking on Lings Road if it was sealed. We certainly agree with, I believe, Mr O'Brien's suggestion that parking should not be allowed on Lings Road, and that's certainly not the intent. Our client would be more than delighted to hear that they don't have to widen Lings Road any more than is absolutely necessary to make this application work. And we are certainly open to the suggestion of modifying the car park location. If there's a perception amongst councillors that the location of the car park is too close to the residents, we're certainly open to opportunities to shift or relocate that. We do have the benefit of some space on this site, albeit we have sought to locate all of the non-farming uses really over on the western boundary of the site. There was also a suggestion about access coming into the site at the northern boundary. Certainly something that we are absolutely open to discussing. However, I don't think it would necessarily, in the minds of Council's traffic engineers, unwind the need to seal a section of Lings Road, which again, we're of course on board with. From an environmental perspective, I believe Councillor Mason raised a point about the biodiversity assessment from EcoLink, perhaps not painting as a rosy picture about the impacts to Mertnagirt Lagoon. And I think just to provide clarity, what the report says is certainly there are potential impacts to occur to Mertnagirt Lagoon, and that is obviously the impacts of stormwater runoff, noise and light, particularly on migratory birds, which has been mentioned this evening as well. What it goes on to say in the very next paragraph is that there's recommendations for a series of mitigation measures to avoid that. Now, from a stormwater perspective, the revised and scaled back proposal has done away with a drainage basin that was proposed quite close to Mertnagirt Lagoon. So we feel like we've certainly curtailed that issue with the scaled back proposal. And in terms of the impacts upon migratory birds, our engagement with both Parks Victoria and DELP suggested that mitigation measures such as a landscape buffer, which has been proposed within the plans, is appropriate. We also note that the highest impact to the migratory birds is during the nighttime period. We note that the function centre is actually the building located furthest north, away from Mertnagirt Lagoon, rather than the one that's in closest proximity to the lagoon itself. There was a suggestion about Parks Victoria saying their understanding was of no stormwater running into the lagoon. Obviously that's verbal submissions, but I believe what Parks Victoria, if they've stated that, would say is that their understanding is there's going to be limited additional runoff because there is in fact no additional buildings and it's really just a car park and roads that we're dealing with. There's also been some matters raised around the need to do an EPBC referral under the Act. What we would note with that is that an EPBC referral is a non-mandatory, really it's a voluntary process, and we acknowledge that it's something that we should be looking at. However, our submission is that we've mitigated any of the issues that would arise, and that once we've got the security of having a planning permit in place, our client will go to the cost and expense of doing an EPBC referral, and of course we can't start once that process has gone through. There was also some submissions from Ms Sincock around the noise assessment. There was a suggestion that 4 days of that assessment was inappropriate for doing background noise testing. Certainly we acknowledge there are some days, 4 days in fact, where there was wind and rain, which does certainly hinder background noise testing. But we note that there was 5 to 6 days where the conditions were ideal for that. So the claims that the noise report is founded on poor background information, we say is not the case. That's our submissions, councillors. Be pleased to answer any questions that you might have. Might grab a glass of water if that's okay.
Thank you, Simon. Right, councillors, questions for Simon, please. Councillor Murray.
You've heard the discussion about the sealed road and that if approved or accepted that there'd be 150 vehicles would need to travel on that road before the condition that is sealed. Is there any thought from the applicant about the offer to seal the road straight up?
It's not something that we've necessarily dealt with our client on specifically, but through the, I guess, the process of making submissions to Council and Vic Roads, there was certainly consideration of when there was a reasonable trigger to do so, of sealing the road, and the 150 vehicles per day was the basis for that. So,
thank you. Councillor Mason?
Just follow on from the sealing discussion, the car park also, I suppose in some ways it's a hard surface, it's like a roof. What area is that? Is there, do you have any calculations there on the volume of water that would come off that?
I apologise, Councillor Mason, I don't have specific volumes or areas for you, but the proposal we put forward was for a gravel seal, which has a level of permeability to it. But again, we make the submissions that the swale system that's been designed by Water Technology to capture those flows is specifically designed to make sure that water is dispersed across the site and taken into the groundwater table system.
Thank you. And I've got a further question just in relation to the applicant realises what the costs of such road and intersection might cost, and I just have a question about those kind of conditions on a small, what I would call a small to medium business.
Yeah, one of the things, Councillor, that's actually drawn out the process, there was much debate with our client about how and where to scale back the proposal and find that balance around something that was going to be commercially viable, that was going to drive a profit, that was going to underpin the type of investment that's going to be required. And I guess in part, Councillor Murray, here to answer your question, that's why a level of delay to the ceiling of Lings Road was sought. We are going to have to fund the intersection upgrade from the outset, and we understand the cost of that to be circa $800,000, although that was some years ago now and costs have gone up. But our client is in discussions with Regional Development Victoria around grant and funding opportunities to support tourism proposals, which we know is a major push from the state government at present.
The answer on that question. Councillors, any further questions for Simon? Thank you, Simon, for your submission. Council will now discuss the matter and we would look to having any other further questions at this point of anyone, councillors? No? Councillor Sullivan.
So, Madam Chair, if there's no further questions to be had, I am happy to move a recommendation.
Councillor Sullivan, what's the recommendation?
I think I'm happy to move an alternate recommendation, being that, having listened to the community, that the responsible authority, having considered all matters which the Planning and Environmental Act 1987 requires it to consider, decides to refuse to grant a planning permit, for the use and development of the land for a restaurant, function centre and outdoor recreation facility, Children's Farm, at 65 to 105 Lings Road, Conowari, on the following grounds. Would you like me to read through all the grounds?
I might just get you to read the first lines of each one.
I'll summarise. There's 5 points here. That the proposed development does not comply with the municipal planning strategy with subsections referring to settlement, environmental and landscape values, and natural resource management. 2, the proposal does not comply with the planning policy framework, particularly distinctive areas and landscapes, and the Bellarine Peninsula and tourism in rural areas, as well as roads. That 3, the proposal does not comply with the objectives and policies of the farming zone in regards to it compromises the agricultural productivity of the land and will not be associated with agricultural use on the land and is not compatible with adjoining and nearby land uses. 4, that the proposal does not comply with the Bellarine Peninsula localised planning statement from September 2015, in that it compromises the rural character of the location and that will result in potential detrimental environmental impacts on the lagoon. And 5, that the proposal does not comply with Clause 65 of the Greater Geelong Planning Scheme, in that the proposed uses and the development are not in accordance with the orderly and proper planning of the area, that the proposed use will detrimentally affect the environment of the area, and that finally, the proposed use will detrimentally affect the amenity of the area. In particular, the proposal would create unreasonable amenity impacts to the adjoining properties due to noise, evening night operating hours, light spill and vehicle movements on Lings Road.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Do you have a seconder for your motion?
Draw straws, Councillor.
Councillor Mason seconded. Councillor Sullivan, would you like to speak to your moving?
I believe I've made all my major points clear by stating the outlines in this alternate recommendation. Having heard from the community, I find it very difficult to argue any argument otherwise. And as I've outlined there, the impact on not only many planning regulations, but the amenity of the area, I believe, will be significant. And I'm proud to be moving this alternate recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Councillor Grisbeck. I hear that there's been a great deal of effort to compromise, and I hear an excellent case for the progress of this project. But I'm sorry that it's a situation where we have to face up to international treaties, such as Ramsar, such as Chamba, such as Jamba. And I don't think that we've had adequate consideration to the environmental effects. Despite all attempts, that's my position on that. And it's been raised to some extent, but it's the distinctive areas and landscapes. And to some extent, we talked about the golf course and the pre-existing situation from the golf course, a death by 1,000 cuts. And that's what DAL has been all about in the first place, to actually draw a line and say no more. Now, anybody that takes on a project from now on has to understand that we are really have been serious about drawing the line about protecting the rural landscape and protecting our pristine areas. So it's regrettable, but we do have these the biodiversity needs and the threats on our biodiversity, and these are increasingly important problems, and we have to face up to them. And so that's why I'm supporting this motion, this alternative motion.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Councillor Usher.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the alternative suggestion, Councillor Sullivan and Councillor Mason. Quite simply, I see this one as incompatible with the character of Barwon Heads, particularly the rural aspect on Lings Road. Of all the Bellarine townships, Barwon Heads is probably the leader and the pace setter of the need to retain its unique township feel, that village feel. And this application does have a lot of merit, and I thank you for the work that you've all put in. I think you've done a good job in compromising and addressing the concerns. And I do absolutely support the nature and the mix of the proposed venue as well, but just not for here. There's a long history in Barwon Heads of battling to retain the natural environment, to protect the wetlands, and to obviously fix the boundary of the Barwon Heads township. And this is, to me, chipping away at all of those elements, as Andrew McCauley so eloquently pointed out. Arguably, for me, traffic, parking, lights, dust, and even stormwater and environmental impacts can be managed. And music is fabulous, and I love music as much as anybody. I actually happen to really enjoy really loud music as well. But noise that is foreign to the natural environment is really difficult to ignore, and certainly every week for a relatively long period of the evening. And I can see, or I can hear in my mind's ear, how that would change the character and the setting that is a huge part of the appeal for the Conowari community. We live about 1 kilometre away from the beach in Ocean Grove, and we delight in hearing the sound of the surf in the summer of an evening. It's actually like listening to peace and gentleness. And for me, that noise issue is a genie that once out of the bottle would be very, very difficult to put back in. And for that, as probably the major reason, along with the significance of the environmental impacts that would need to be managed, mean that I can't support the original recommendation, and I absolutely applaud the alternate. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Do you want to bring that mic just a little bit closer?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I apologise to the audience tonight for my sometimes difficult questions, but I've got to ask the difficult questions. And I believe it's important that we do that. Obviously, Councillor Asher said some things about Barwon Heads that we all know about. We've all known Barwon Heads for quite a long time, and the road safety is certainly an issue for me. Having been a visitor for Barwon Heads for most of my life, I understand that 80 zone has gone in the last few years because of probably the golf course, not because of Lings Road. But I think if you put another 150 to 200 people going down Lings Road, it's only going to double that problem down there, and so it's only going to make that even worse. And I think we have a responsibility as a councillor to protect our citizens and the citizens that use our areas. I'm a bit concerned about the Ramsar wetland being being threatened, yet I'm confused that the area is used for duck shooting. I don't understand why, but that's an argument for another day, perhaps in another 16 days when we go to a state election. The dust is an issue for me, and the first thing I would do would be to bitumenise that road, and I can't understand why the applicant isn't doing that. I guess it's all about cost. And for me, if you want to have a tourism facility, why not go down to Jarralinga? It's a great facility there that's completely underutilised, and to reopen that facility would be a great benefit to the town and to our natural wildlife. So I can't support this application for those reasons. I think the road is busy enough as it is, and as Councillor Asher said, the noise of the beach at night is something that we all bought in coastal regions for. So to threaten that is something that I won't tolerate. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Nelson. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I find this confusing, and I imagine the crowd here tonight find it confusing as well, that an alternative motion comes out of the same department where the officers recommend granting a planning permit for this project. That in itself, I mean, that's the system we have, but I think that is confusing and difficult to follow. I can see where this is going with the numbers tonight, and so I think this is a really good project. I think it's a good project for the area, for the Bellarine, and I'm supportive of it, and I will vote against the alternative motion. See, I base my opinion on this on actually what's before us on policy. And it complies in every respect. You can talk about dust, noise, Vic roads, the lagoon and all that, but it's all been ticked off by the relevant authorities as far as I can see, and is what the report actually says. Vic roads gives the tick for the right-hand turn lane and what's required for that. DEWALP are the responsible authority for the lagoon, and they support the project. There's other authorities that have all given their tick of approval for this project. So I'm looking for something that maybe say, well, no, don't support it because of you know, A, B, and C. I can't find anything because in the report it's there. You know, we all love the sound of the sea. It'll still be there whether this project is supported or not. And there's conditions.
Sorry, excuse me. Just let Councillor Murray finish, please.
It's the conditions that have been imposed. Like there was the request for, you know, 4 nights a week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 6 p.m. to midnight. That's been restricted back to Friday and Saturday night only, 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. There's no new buildings. There's no vegetation removed. There is a requirement of that it only requires 60 car parking spaces, and they're providing 75. It's consistent. This project is consistent with all relevant guidelines and the objectives of the state and local planning policies. Look, I know it's superfluous because of people who've spoken before me, but I will vote against the alternative motion.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. I might just say a couple of comments. Coming from the other end of Geelong, having seen those previous applications for similar type uses, I would say this is smaller than Evans Road, for example. But you can see how these applications can be assessed in a completely different way depending on where they are, particularly but they have still the same kind of issues that are raised by certain people. So, you know, I've written things like dust and noise, amenity, acoustics, vehicles, you know, sight distances for traffic etc. I think what I've seen here is there is 150 objectors, of which the community, I guess, needs to be congratulated for organising themselves to inform people, because not a lot of these processes is necessarily dropped into your letterbox. But I think the community can be proud of the way that it's formed together. I think the fact that we've got 50 conditions on the permit, I do struggle to think how the 50 conditions could be monitored and enforced. And look, I would say to the applicant that I think the idea of the business is sound. I think that the fact that you would have no extra buildings and that you're trying to engage in the landscape by which you put it into is admirable. But I think these things should be now tested at a different level than us. I think that, you know, we're hearing the 150 objections, and I think every other one of those that we spoke about had been a VCAT decision. So I feel I'm going to support the alternative motion, only because I think 50 conditions is a difficult one for a small business to particularly monitor and engage on. So in saying that, councillors, I think we've all had conversation. We would probably put that to the vote. For those councillors that are for the alternate motion, please raise your hand. Thank you. Those against? Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for attending tonight. That is the decision of our committee. We thank you for your attendance. Thank you. Thank you to the applicant. Thank you to the officers.